2022 is over. Some say, thank goodness. Some say, what's next? Are we really that excited? Because, the pain we know may be better than what we don't know yet. That's part of Hamlet's soliloquy, right? We flee off to the things we don't know. Is that really better? Well, when we look back at the year, in past years, I've used names as a way to try to capture those moments that were important in the year. They were names we knew in March, and then we don't remember them anymore. But this year, I'm changing it up. I'm going to use numbers instead of names. But I don't expect you to guess what the numbers are. This is more like the Harper's Index, where you hear a number, and then you find out what the meaning of that number is. So I apologize to Harper's Index, but this is Shalom's Index, maybe. 275,000. That's the approximate total of COVID deaths in the United States in 2022. Now that's down substantially from 2021. 2021, we lost about 470,000 people to COVID, so 275 is about 40% less. Every year, heart disease and cancer kill over 600,000 a year each, so 275 is less than that. Accidental deaths are about 200,000, so comparable. And the regular flu kills about 50,000 people a year. So COVID is still 4 times as deadly as the flu. Ironically, most COVID deaths that are happening now are actually in people who've received at least one vaccination shot. Now, this is not to say that the vaccines are useless. It's not true at all. It's a combination of the waning effectiveness of those early doses, people being fed up with precautions and masks, and the risks of COVID, even with a vaccination, to the older generation, the oldest population, which is actually the most vaccinated, regardless of political affiliation. So the people who are dying are older, and they tend to be more vaccinated, so it's, as it works out, the ones who are still dying, some of them, in fact many of them, were vaccinated. Will 2023 be less or more? Another number, 76.4. 76.4 is the average life expectancy in the United States. It's declined for the second year in a row. Its peak was 78.8 in 2019. You may recall a scene played for laughs in the movie The Princess Bride, where someone is attached to a machine, and they run the machine, and they suck a year of his life away. Well, we found a way to do it. We've sucked away 2 years of life expectancy in the last 2 years. Another number, 250,000. 250,000 is the European Union's estimate of the Russian military's dead and wounded casualties in the Ukraine war. Now, the Ukrainian government itself estimates about 105,000 Russian military casualties, and the Ukrainian military admits 50,000 of their own. Again, we don't know which numbers are to be believed, but everyone acknowledges there have been at least tens of thousands of civilian casualties in Ukraine and untold amount of damage. We might have cheered at certain moments, like, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition, or Russian warship, go F yourself. But the war goes on at untold cost in dollars, in lives, and in suffering. 516,470. If anyone guesses this, I would be shocked. These are the number of votes received by the Israeli rightist wing party, Religious Zionism and Jewish Power. It was like a coalition of parties. This is the party of Bezalel Smotrich, the religious Zionist settler, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, the proto-fascist disciple of Meir Kahane. They received 11% of the popular vote, which translated into 14 seats in the Israeli Knesset, and giving them king-making power in the governing coalition. They've already begun writing laws that will restrain the Israeli Supreme Court and its right to invalidate laws. They will expand settlements. They will punish the Palestinian Authority. They will enact a new regime of what they call law and order against Palestinian Arab communities, both in the West Bank and in Israel proper, including most recently trying to ban the flying of the Palestinian flag. And they will take inflammatory moves like visiting the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Now, by comparison, I'll give you another number. The left-wing parties of Labor and Meretz, which is even further to the left than Labor on peace and civil rights, and Hadash, which is the Israeli Communist Party, the only real party that has both Arabs and Jews actively involved in the grassroots, well, those three left-wing parties totaled 505,520 votes, almost comparable to the 516. But because Labor and Meretz did not make a coalition, like those other right-wing parties did, Meretz didn't pass the threshold to get in the Knesset, so 100,000 votes were wasted. Those two together would have had 9 seats. But in reality, we only have 4, with Labor and Meretz out of the parliament. Another vote, 546. This was the final margin of victory for Colorado Republican Representative Lauren Boebert in her re-election campaign. There were 237,000 votes cast, and she won by 546 in a very red district. It was a stark demonstration of the red wave that didn't materialize. It resulted in a surprisingly narrow Republican House majority and 51 Democratic senators. Factors in this surprise included continued job growth despite inflation, and the Fed raising interest rates, and of course the decision by the Supreme Court in June that reversed Roe versus Wade and returned the legislation or banning of abortion to individual states. Another number, 19. 19 was the number of students killed in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, in May. Now that 19 is one fewer than the 20 students killed at Sandy Hook Elementary a decade ago in 2012. That was a decade ago. Now, unlike 2012, when nothing was able to pass Congress, this time the Safer Community Act did pass Congress in June in the aftermath of Uvalde, with a dozen Republicans in both House and Senate voted for it. It expanded background checks for those under age 21, offered extended support for mental health services, encouraged red flag laws to take away guns from dangerous people. It addressed gun trafficking and tried to address the boyfriend loophole. Now, Uvalde was one of 639 mass shootings this last year, mass shooting being defined as 4 or more people being at least wounded, not counting the shooter themselves. 639, what a number. This is according to the Gun Violence Archive. And one of that 639 took place right here on July 4th in Highland Park, killing 7 and wounding 48. Another important number, 8 billion. The world population crossed the number of 8 billion people near the end of 2022. Despite all the losses from war and violence and illness and natural disaster, the power of life, the desire to bring children into the world, pushes onward and upward. And if every one of those 8 billion people gave you just $5.50, you could have bought Twitter for $44 billion. And 44 is 1 day less than the number of days Liz Truss lasted as British Prime Minister. A modern record without dying in office, and she did not beat the lettuce. They put a head of lettuce and said, will it last longer than Liz Truss? And it turns out the lettuce won. I think someone's doing the same thing for Kevin McCarthy in the House. Now, 2022 was not all doom and gloom, of course, as no year is. Beautiful books were published, movies were made and shown, music composed and performed. The James Webb Space Telescope showed us the farthest reaches of the universe, and we successfully managed to hit an asteroid with a rocket, a bullet shooting down another bullet 7 million miles from Earth at the speed of 14,000 miles per hour. We created the first nuclear fusion reaction that produced more energy than it took to make it possible. And something like 3 million lives were saved by the dissemination of COVID vaccines. Artificial intelligence has begun writing and drawing with astonishing skill, making those of us who write and grade others a bit nervous. It might be time that something passes the Turing test, where a person doesn't know they're communicating with a computer rather than a real person. That may not be very far away. Yay? 2022 had its losses as well, some shocking, and sometimes, honestly, I was surprised to find out they were still alive when the obituary came through. The Queen is dead, long live the King in the United Kingdom. Actors Sidney Poitier and Angela Lansbury, William Hurt, Ray Liotta, and James Caan. Musicians Olivia Newton-John, Loretta Lynn, Coolio, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Meatloaf. Sports figures Vin Scully, Bill Russell, and Guy Lafleur. Political figures like Mikhail Gorbachev, Madeleine Albright, Ken Starr, Orrin Hatch, and Shinzo Abe. Unknown people who changed our lives, from Dr. Samuel Katz, who invented the measles vaccine and saved millions of lives, and high school teacher Ann Turner Cook, whose 5-year-old face was the Gerber baby on millions of bottles of baby food. She was 95. And there were the private losses that we faced, or were faced by people we know and care about. Some died too soon. Some may have outlived their enjoyment of life. And some lived a good and rich life and died a relatively good death. This is true every year. A psychological wisdom of Jewish culture that enables us to create a calendar and mental space to remember. A yard site on the anniversary of a death, a Shabbat space, a memorial on Yom Kippur during the Jewish New Year. It's always worth looking back at the general New Year as well. Now, one of my promises every year with my year in review talk is to look back at the prophecies that I made last January. I look back at my talk from last January and I see that I wimped out. I did not make any clear prophecies for this year. Good thing, given how unpredictable 2022's guesses and results turned out to be. The Russian invasion of Ukraine and the energy spike that led to inflation and higher gas prices, everything changed. Eventually, the inflation, the gas prices settled down by December, but inflation at 5% is still double the 2.5% that economists had guessed at. And in theory, they know more than I do about the economy, so good thing I didn't guess. And to be honest, with an electric car, I never have any idea what gas prices are anymore anyways. To be honest, looking back on 2022 is difficult as a Jewish person. Not only because the Israeli election empowered parties and politicians that I find objectionable, unethical, and dangerous. It's dangerous out here for Jews too. Almost exactly a year ago, on January 15th, there was a hostage crisis in a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, that was live streamed on Zoom, where a delusional anti-Semite demanded to speak to the chief American rabbi at the Central Synagogue, which is a Reform synagogue in New York, but it's a big one, but there is no one central synagogue, of course. And this was in order to get them to free a security prisoner, as if the Jews had the power to do that. We had the books Maus and an adaptation of the Diary of Anne Frank banned from some schools and school libraries, because evidently naked mice are very dangerous. And we had Ye, aka Kanye West's Pearl of Wisdom, about going DEFCON 3 on the Jews. Vandalism and graffiti and online and in-person harassment. And then to top it off in December, Representative George Santos, if that is his real name, claiming to be Jewish, and then Jewish, and then whoops. Even if he is eventually shown to have some Jewish heritage or even a small percentage of Jewish DNA, I'm going to demand a recount. We'll be talking more about anti-Semitism specifically at the end of this month during our observance of International Holocaust Memorial Day on January 27th. But suffice it to say now that we are not laughing about it, Dave Chappelle. So let's be bold. Let's have some real predictions for this year, for 2023. Since we're focused on numbers, I'll give you a number of predictions and the odds that they come true. We don't have a Kol Hadash bookie, so it'll have to be a gentle person's bet, but I'll give you a prediction and my odds. First prediction. This is an A or B. One or the other of these things will happen. Israel will have a political crisis that will topple the coalition government again, leading to elections again, or the Palestinian Authority will fall apart under pressure from Israel, Hamas, and its own people. Odds against this? Well, I'd say it's a 4-to-1 shot that this happens. But the odds that the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism's Secular Israel trip in December 2023 goes forward, and you can still register for it, by the way, that odds of it going are 99%. Never say always, but we need to see what's really happening there now more than ever. Another prediction. Kevin McCarthy will not make it to December, next December, as Speaker of the House of Representatives. Odds 3-to-1. Maybe I'm being generous. Another prediction. The movie Top Gun Maverick will be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture. It was nominated for a Golden Globe. Odds 5-to-1. Because after all, it got people back in theaters. And it's about the money, as much as they say it's about the art. Another prediction. If forgotten classified documents are found at a third location under the control of President Biden, and Joe Biden has another recurrence of skin cancer lesions in 2023, Joe Biden will not run for re-election in 2024. I mean, the campaign slogan of "Grandpa forgot what?" that he didn't know, the tough sell, that's still 15-to-1, because he seems pretty gung-ho to go, but there's a chance. Another prediction. The Chicago White Sox will have a worse record than the Chicago Cubs. Give that 3-to-1. Another synagogue in North America will be attacked while people are in it. Not a middle-of-the-night vandalism or an anonymous social media posting, or even somebody driving by a parking lot and yelling at people, as took place in Michigan just last month. I say the odds of that happening are maybe 6-to-1. So worse than some of the sure things like Kevin McCarthy in the House, but better than Joe Biden not running. Now, this still won't prove that it's 1938 Germany all over again, because the police will protect the synagogue and its members instead of standing aside or encouraging the attack. And the attacker might come from any number of directions. The attacker could be a white nationalist, like the attack on the Pittsburgh synagogue, or a Muslim anti-Zionist, like the incident in Colleyville, Texas, or a black Hebrew Israelite, like the attack on a kosher supermarket in Jersey City, New Jersey. Another sad prediction. COVID deaths in 2023 will continue above 200,000. Because do you really think it's going to get any better? Or that people are going to go back to being more careful? Unfortunately, I give that a 3-to-1 odd. Number 8 of my predictions. Renewable energy, like solar, wind, hydroelectric, will produce more power than coal in the US for the first time. I give that 2-to-1 odds, because that's the way things are trending. Number 9. Former President Donald Trump will be indicted for something. Could be January 6th, could be the documents, could be election meddling in Georgia or New York financial issues, or something else that we don't even know about yet. I give that 3-to-1. And last, the sun will continue to rise in the east and set in the west. Chicago weather will remain unpredictable. Summer will be hot, winter will be cold, and people will complain about both on social media, even though they moved here knowing what the weather would be. And Kol Hadash Humanistic Congregation will provide support and learning and inspiration and connection for those who participate with us. And the odds of those things are 100%. There's a piece of wisdom in one of the oldest Jewish books that we have. It's called the Book of Ecclesiastes, probably written in the last few centuries before the Common Era. And in Ecclesiastes, it talks about the passage of time and the fact that in the sweep of things, good things happen and bad things happen. Life goes up and life goes down. But what's eternal is us, our memories, our connections, and what we value. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the sky, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war, and certainly in this year just begun, we hope, a time of peace.